1936, construction of Hoover Dam is completed. Also that year, British luxury liner RMS Queen Mary leaves Southampton for her maiden transatlantic crossing, and actor Burt Reynolds was born. It was also one of the worst weather years in the history of Delmarva.
A deep freeze for the ages in January, horrendous flooding in March, followed by a brutal summertime drought, 12 straight days in July. Thermometers topped 100 degrees.
And Mother Nature wasn't done yet. That fall, she sent a hurricane swirling up the Atlantic coast. Dire warnings went out for the whole area between the Outer Banks and the New Jersey beaches. So what happened?
Why, thanks for asking, because the man with the answers is right here on our couch. Throwback Thursday, Jim Duffy of Secrets of the Eastern Shore. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me, as always.
So, hurricane in 1936.
Yes.
What got you started thinking about this?
A few weeks ago, every once in a while I go on a solo trip.
Okay.
And I had a beautiful solo trip, all planned out. And it was in the Smoky Mountains.
Oh.
So I found myself about 30 miles from Asheville, 2 days before Hurricane Helene came in. And I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew that there was going to be a lot of rain, and I decided to do that trip some other time. And I got in the car and I left rather than go through 4 days of rain when I had all these elaborate
Because
plans.
you were just thinking rain.
But then you're watching the newscasts, you know, you're coming back home and you see the newscasts and read the headlines, and you're just kind of like praying for a miracle.
Yeah.
And that's what tripped something in my head. I'm like, wait, wasn't there a storm here where those kind of miracles did happen? And that's what got me back to this hurricane in 1936.
Okay.
The coastline from Assateague up to Lewis got it really bad. So Ocean City had like 20 inches of sand on the streets.
Oh my.
Parts of the boardwalk ended up on Baltimore Avenue, all kinds of fishing cabins and everything down on Assateague gone. So it was the coastline, it was also the boats that were caught out in the water were in real trouble. And the headlines the next day were kind of like the headlines that we have seen in recent weeks. In Lewis, it was 42 people on a fishing vessel. The headline said they were unreported. 3 people had managed to hold on to some wreckage from the ship and came in, and they described what had happened and how quickly the ship went down. And that story concluded with the Coast Guard saying, we're not looking for survivors, we're looking for bodies. Oh. And it was the same thing in Maryland. There was big headlines that 16 people had died on Assateague. And over the next 48 hours, those headlines turned out to be mostly completely wrong.
Really?
Yes. So the first thing that happened, we'll start up in Delaware. The Coast Guard is out looking for bodies, and they come up to a barge that is inside the breakwater in a safe area there in the storm. And that barge is flying some kind of signal flag that says, Coast Guard, you should stop here. And they stop by, and 32 of the 42 guys from that fishing vessel are enjoying a hearty breakfast on board. And it turns out it was like a magnificent bit of seamanship. Someone, as that ship went down, had managed to get control of the smaller vessel they used to lay their fishing nets, the Seine nets, and they had loaded 32 people on board, and they had made it into the breakwater and onto this barge, and so they were all fine.
Oh my goodness.
Down in Assateague, it wasn't like a big group of people. It was a bunch of people in like different fishing cabins and things like that. But there's one incredible woman there that I'd like to talk about. Her name was Elizabeth Fulton. She was 23 years old. She and her husband were on a fishing trip. Their cabin got swept out to sea, but somehow they had gotten out of the cabin in time, and so now they're on the beach in the middle of this horrific stretch of storm. And they start walking towards the Coast Guard station. A wave comes by and pulls her husband out to sea. And 23 years old, she runs straight into the sea, somehow manages to grab him, pulls him up on the sand as far as she can get, and then realizes that they're far from out of trouble because he has lost his mind. He is,
oh my goodness.
He's screaming and he's yelling and he's hallucinating. He must have hit his head or something like that. I don't know how she figured out to do this, but what she did was start piling sand on top of his body, and she covered him completely in sand except for his face. And there isn't a big explanation in the stories about this, but in thinking about it, I'm thinking that first of all, if she's got all that sand packed up on him, it makes it less likely that another wave will take him away.
Right.
And if there's wreckage in that wave, the sand will be like padding.
Right.
And also the wind and the rain won't be hitting him so much, and so he'll get a chance to calm down. How do you do this in the
Wow.
middle of a crisis like this at 23 years old? So they waited out there for hours with him buried in the sand, and then the storm started to get down, and he's still out of it and hurt, and she starts dragging her husband. She's got 6 miles to go to the Coast Guard station. I'm happy to report that she didn't have to go all 6 miles. She only had to go a couple miles before a guy was patrolling with the Coast Guard found them and helped them in. And the story said that when she stepped into the Coast Guard station, she just collapsed from exhaustion.
That's incredible.
Now I'm sure that God had something to do with the strength she was able to find out there. But still, this is a woman who made her own miracle, right?
No kidding. No.
It's amazing. Elizabeth Fulton.
Elizabeth Fulton. Jim Duffy, another fabulous
As always.
story. Thank you so much.
Thank you.